So are we ready? Got your book? Here we go. One of the most influential books in Western Christianity, and in many ways the first autobiography, the first person to really sit down and do this kind of deeply psychological account of himself. Okay, as we go through this and we look at some of Augustine's major themes, I want to keep a focus on his main idea. And this comes at the very beginning. It's one of the most famous quotations from this book on page 14. Yet these humans, due part of your creation as they are, still do long to praise you. You stir us so that praising you may bring us joy, because you have made us and drawn us to yourself, and our heart is unquiet until it rests in you. Sometimes the earlier translations would say our hearts are restless until they rest in thee. This, for Augustine, is going to be the key. We are, according to Augustine, made by God for relationship with God. And if we are not in that relationship, we are unquiet. We are not at rest. We are not at peace. So this is really his story of coming to that peace, of how that happens for him. There's going to be a lot of details, a lot of going in different directions, but ultimately this is what he's trying to get to. How does he find that rest in God? All right. In order to understand why rest in God is so key for Augustine, we have to think a little bit about who Augustine's God is. Now, I want to be clear here. Augustine's God is really, at least in these ways, no different than, say, Athanasius's God or the God of Chalcedon. This is a pretty common understanding of who God is in the early church, and I would say for many Christians throughout the centuries. What makes Augustine really helpful is that he's poetic. Okay, for some people that makes him completely unhelpful because they wish he would just say it more succinctly. But he spends a lot of time talking about this God, and doing so in ways that I think are helpful because they are kind of mind bending. So let's just look at this quotation. It starts on 15. We'll go until I feel like stopping. You are the most high, excellent, most powerful, omnipotent, supremely merciful and supremely just, most hidden yet intimately present, infinitely beautiful and infinitely strong, steadfast yet elusive, unchanging yourself though you control the change in all things, never new, never old, renewing all things, yet wearing down the proud though they know it not, ever active, ever at rest, gathering while knowing no need, supporting and filling and guarding, creating and nurturing and perfecting, seeking although you lack nothing. You love without frenzy, you are jealous yet secure, you regret without sadness, you grow angry yet you remain tranquil, you alter your works but never your plan, you take back what you find although you never lost it. You are never in need yet you rejoice in your gains, never avaricious yet you demand profits. You allow us to pay you more than you demand, and so you become our debtor. Yet which of us possesses anything that does not already belong to you? You owe us nothing, yet you pay your debts. You write off our debts to you, yet you lose nothing thereby. I want you to just stop for a moment and think about what Augustine just did in describing God. Think about a picture of that God. Can you make one in your head? It's kind of tough, right? This isn't a God that is just like a big human being. So many of the things that Augustine says that are in these pairs, one of them could be said about human beings, but not both of them. You're either new or old if you're a human being. Right? We're either active or we're at rest. We live an either or kind of life. So Augustine is very clear that his God is not just a big person, but he's also very clear that his God is personal. His God is intimately involved with us. In fact, Augustine's God, he'll say in other places, is really more intimate to us than we are to ourselves. So, in theological terms, we talk about Augustine's God as being both transcendent, transcending the human, and immanent, right with us. Both of those things. I think another thing to say about Augustine's God is that Augustine's God does not need us. Says that, right? That you are not in need. Now, I think for some of us that can seem a little off-putting. Like, well, what does that mean? I mean, if I were to say that I don't need other people, that would make me a misanthrope, right? We're social beings, of course we need. But the way that Augustine talks about Augustine's God is that God doesn't need us. God didn't create out of need or compulsion. God created surely out of love, the sheer overflowing of God's love, which allows a different kind of God-human relationship than, say, a human-to-human relationship. In human relationships, there's always an element of need, of people needing something. God not needing us, I think, for Augustine, is very comforting. That God doesn't rely on us in the sense that God needs something from us. And that actually allows God's love to be just absolute. There's no hint of selfishness in God's relationship with us. There's no hint of any manipulation. There's none of those things that come with having need are present in God's relationship with us. It's also clear why we need God, right? For Augustine, God is absolutely the source of all things. This should sound like Athanasius. This isn't Augustine's idea alone. But Augustine's God is, if you want to think about this, the source of everything we are, the source of every good thing, the source of our action, the source of our rest, the source of our breath, the source of our life, the source of our joy. I mean, the source of everything. So of course for Augustine, people need to be back in relationship with that God. The final thing I'll say about Augustine's God is that Augustine's God is a God who creates and there's an end, by which I mean there's a telos. In some ways I'm just saying again what I've already said, but I think it's an important point. God didn't create us as machines. God created us to be in relationship with God. There's a point to this story. There's a way this is supposed to turn out for Augustine. So when he looks at humanity, he's looking at humanity through that prism. We have a purpose. We have an end. We have a thing we're supposed to get to, and how are we doing on that? I think at least for some people in the modern world, there's a sense that we really are autonomous, that we are self-created, or at least we're created by mechanistic forces that don't have an end in mind. There's not something that's supposed to happen. There's just the succession of things that have happened to get us here, and then there'll be other things, but there's no end. There's no way the story is supposed to turn out. For Augustine, there's a very clear end. There's a purpose. This isn't simply God creating and just letting whatever happens happen. God is intimately involved in the creation and in helping us arrive at that proper end. That also means for Augustine that if we don't arrive at that proper end, something's gone wrong. Right? We don't just make up our own story about what is supposed to happen. We either get to the end God wants us to, or we don't. Okay. I want to talk about one of the most famous episodes in the Confessions, the pear tree. This again is a story that drives a lot of people nuts. So Augustine steals some pears. He was a kid. Like, really, you're gonna spend pages and pages diagnosing your theft of pears? Really, Augustine? But here Augustine is doing two things. He's very clearly laying out his understanding of sin and evil. He's also making claims about how humans function. Think about this for a second. Augustine tells a story in which there's a tree in a garden with fruit you're not supposed to eat. Are there any other stories in the Christian canon about trees in gardens with fruit you're not supposed to? Oh, well, yeah. Augustine here is very clearly not just thinking about his own life as a teenager, but is thinking about what drives humans to do bad things. He's thinking about not just himself, but humanity writ large, starting with the story in Genesis. Why do we eat the fruit? Why did Augustine eat the fruit? Why did Adam and Eve eat the fruit? He wants to know, why do we eat the damn fruit? And he has some answers. So let's start on page 38. And here this should sound a little bit familiar to some things we've said about Athanasius. I need some coffee. Augustine has the same issue that all Christian people who believe that God created out of nothing have, which is that if there is evil in the world, and it's a created thing, then that would mean God created it. But if you say that God created evil, then you're talking about a God who is, well, evil in some sense. So what's happening here, right? Is creation bad? Are the pears bad? Is the tree bad? Like, what's bad here? Well, Augustine, like Athanasius and others, is going to say, no. God didn't create things that are evil. The problem isn't the pears, and it isn't the tree, and it's not creation. It's not our physical beings. The problem is that we love the wrong things the wrong way. So on page 38. Sin gains entrance through these, he's talking specifically here about friendship, and similar good things when we turn to them with immoderate desire, since they are the lowest kinds of goods, and we thereby turn away from the better and higher, from you yourself, O Lord our God, and your truth and your law. These lowest goods hold delight for us indeed, but no such delights as does my God, who made all things. For in him the just man finds delight, and for upright souls he himself is joy. The problem isn't that I like pears. I do. They're juicy and yummy. The problem is if I like pears so much that I make them a greater good to me than God. The problem for Augustine isn't that he has friends, but that he makes some of those friends stand in the position of God. Always for Augustine, evil and sin is turning away from the good that is God to lesser goods and loving them out of proportion. That is the corruption, right? We turn from God, we turn to other things, and it isn't the thing I'm turning to that's necessarily a problem. It's not the pear. The turn is the problem. The fact that I was looking at God and then I turned to the pear, that's the problem, not the pear itself, right? If I was eating the nice juicy pear that I had gotten through okay means, and was thanking God for it, great, no turn here. Pear's not a problem. But when I have to turn from God to get the pear, and then I eat the pear, and I'm not looking at God because I don't want to talk to God because I just stole a pear, now that's a problem. Augustine recognizes that part of what is hard for us is that much of this bad stuff we do has what he talks a counterfeit beauty. So this is on the bottom of page 39. He says, "For in vice there lurks a counterfeit beauty. Pride, for instance, even pride apes sublimity, whereas you are the only God most high above all the others. As for ambition, what does it crave but honor and glory? Well, you are worthy of honor beyond all others and eternally glorious." We keep trying to get things that aren't God to be God because they just in very small ways resemble God. They have a certain kind of beauty, and they have that beauty because they come from God. Our problem is that we prefer them to God. Finally, as Augustine is thinking about what goes wrong with trees and gardens and people, he notes the importance of relationships with other people. One of the things that he comes to in this pear story is that he didn't really like the pear. He didn't want the pears. He wasn't really interested in them. Like, why did he do this? And what he decides is he did it because his friends were. And he wanted to be part of his friend group, and that's really what drove him. Augustine is very aware of the way that friendships. Sorry, my son needed something. Where was I? Oh, right, friendship. That our friends can pull us towards God, and he'll have friends who do that. But these are friends who pull us away from God in the case of the pear tree. The people that you surround yourself with are incredibly important for Augustine. So he notes that human beings are social creatures, and we will do things that we wouldn't normally do for the sake of the praise and the camaraderie with our friends. So part of his question throughout this book is, who are your friends and where are they leading you? How are they leading you? And he notes that in the garden with the tree, we have friends who are leading us in the wrong way. And part of his admonition here is to find better friends.